The basement smelled like wet concrete and old motor oil. And that's the detail my brain decided to lock onto when the metal door slammed shut behind me. Not the duct tape biting into my wrists. Not the man in the gray suit counting $100 bills onto a folding table. The smell, like the parking garage of the apartment building I grew up in on the west side of Cleveland, the one Mom and I lived in when I was 7, before she got us out. Funny what your mind clings to when it's trying not to fall apart. I'm Quinn Halloway. I'm 28 years old, and the man counting that money was paying my fiancé $320,000 in cash for me. 3 days earlier, I'd been sitting on the floor of our apartment in Austin, surrounded by packing peanuts and rolls of bubble wrap, laughing because Tobias had just dropped a wine glass and was pretending he'd done it on purpose for European vibes. That's what he kept calling our trip. European vibes. He'd booked us a 2-week tour through Portugal and Spain to celebrate, he said, the bonus he'd just gotten at the consulting firm. He told me to quit my job at the marketing agency. Babe, you've been miserable there for 2 years. Just walk away. I make enough for both of us now. I remember thinking how lucky I was. How rare it was in this economy to find a man who actually wanted to take care of you. I gave my 2-week notice on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was on a flight to Lisbon. And by Sunday, I was in a basement somewhere outside Porto, watching my fiancé tuck a duffel bag of cash under his arm and refuse to look at me. The man in the gray suit had silver hair at the temples, and the kind of stillness that made you think of someone who's done a lot of waiting in his life, waiting for things to die maybe. He didn't speak much. He just walked in, glanced at me the way you'd glance at a used car, and started counting. Tobias was sweating through his shirt. He kept clearing his throat like he wanted to make small talk and didn't dare. That's everything, the man said finally. His voice was American. East Coast, maybe Boston. That threw me. I don't know what I'd been expecting. Some movie villain accent, I guess, but he sounded like he could have been my dentist. Tobias sipped the bag. Pleasure doing business, Mr. Calloway. Don't say my name. Right, sorry. Tobias edged toward the door. He still hadn't looked at me. 3 years. 3 years of him bringing me coffee in the mornings, of meeting his mother at Thanksgiving, of picking out a ring together at a jeweler in the Domain. He was about to walk out of that basement and leave me with a stranger, and he couldn't even spare me a glance. Tobias, my voice came out cracked. The tape on my mouth had been ripped off when they brought me down. They'd needed me to walk on my own. Tobias, look at me. He paused at the door. His shoulders went up around his ears. Don't make this weird, Quinn. That's what he said. Don't make this weird. Like I was the one being inappropriate. I've got debts you don't know about. This was the cleanest way. I gave you my savings. I gave you $40,000 for the engagement ring you said you couldn't afford yet. Yeah. Well, 40 doesn't cover what I owe. And then he left. He just opened the door and walked out, and the lock clicked behind him. I stood there in the middle of the floor, my wrists bound, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might go down, and I tried to remember how to breathe. The man, Calloway, apparently, though I wasn't supposed to know that, was still standing by the table. He'd zipped the duffel, and now he was just looking at me. Not the way Tobias's friends used to look at me at parties when they thought I couldn't see. Something flatter than that. Something professional. He walked toward me, slow steps, deliberate, like a man approaching a horse he didn't want to spook. He stopped about 3 feet away and tilted his head. How old are you, miss? 28. Where are you from? Texas. Austin. Please, my mother. She has money. She can pay you. Please just let me. Your mother has money. It wasn't a question. He said it like he was tasting the words. What does your mother do, miss? She runs a catering company. In Houston. She does corporate events. She's not rich, but she has savings. I swear to God she'll pay whatever you... I stopped because he'd taken another step forward and his eyes had dropped from my face to my collarbone, specifically to the small silver locket that hung there on a chain so worn the clasp had been replaced twice. It was an oval, about the size of a quarter, etched with a hummingbird in flight. My grandmother's. Mom had given it to me on my 16th birthday and made me promise. Promise me, Quinn. No matter how mad you get at me, no matter what happens, you don't take this off. And I'd worn it every day since. Through showers, through swim meets, through the night in college, when I'd thrown up in a frat house bathroom and a friend had tried to take it off because she thought it'd get tangled in my hair. Calloway's face changed. I want to be clear about this part because I've replayed it 100 times. His face changed. Whatever that flat professional thing had been, it cracked. His mouth opened slightly. The color drained out from under his tan. He took a step back, not forward, back, like I'd raised a weapon. "Where?" he said, and his voice was different now too. "Did you get that necklace?" "It was my grandmother's." "What was your grandmother's name?" "What? What was your grandmother's name, miss?" He lowered his voice, but it was somehow more frightening that way. Like a man trying very hard not to shout. "And your mother's. I need both names, right now." My brain was misfiring. I was bound in a basement in Portugal and a stranger was asking me about my mother. None of it made sense, but the way he was looking at the locket, like it might bite him, made me answer. "My grandmother was Iris Halloway. My mother is Delia Halloway." He didn't move for what felt like a full minute. He just stood there staring at the hummingbird. Then he turned his head and said something sharp in Portuguese to a man I hadn't even noticed standing in the corner of the basement. The man jumped and started fumbling with his phone. Calloway turned back to me. "Miss Halloway," he said my name like it weighed 40 pounds. "I'm going to need you to stay very calm. I'm going to cut you loose. And then you and I are going to get in a car and go somewhere safer than this. Do you understand me?" I didn't. I didn't understand any of it, but I nodded, because what else do you do? He pulled a folding knife from his jacket pocket and his hands, these big steady hands that had been counting money 2 minutes ago, were shaking. He cut the zip ties at my wrists. He didn't touch me otherwise. He stepped back immediately and gestured toward the stairs and said, "Please, ma'am, after you." "Ma'am." He called me ma'am. I made it up 2 steps before my knees gave out, and the man in the corner caught me under the elbow, and Calloway said something else sharp, and the man let go like he'd been burned. The car was a black SUV with tinted windows. He held the door for me. He sat in the front passenger seat, not the back with me, like he didn't feel he had the right. The driver pulled out onto a country road, and I watched the Portuguese countryside go by. Olive trees, white houses, a sky so blue it didn't seem real, and tried to understand why I was alive. Mr. Part of the Merstund, "Calloway. Just Calloway is fine, ma'am? What is happening?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother is a person I owe my life to, ma'am. More than once. I didn't know who you were. The man who sold you to me lied about your background. If I had known," he stopped, swallowed. "If I had known whose daughter you were, I would have killed him in that basement with my bare hands. I may still. My mother runs a catering company." In the rearview mirror, I saw his eyes meet mine. There was something almost gentle in them. "Ma'am, with respect, your mother does not run a catering company." We drove for another 2 hours. I asked questions and he answered the ones he could and deflected the ones he couldn't. He made a phone call in low Portuguese. He made another in English to a woman whose voice I couldn't hear, but whose tone, clipped, fast, ice cold, somehow felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. When he hung up, he handed his phone back to me. "Your mother," he said, "would like to speak with you when she lands." "Lands where?" "Here, ma'am." "She's already in the air." We pulled up to a house outside a town I didn't catch the name of. White stucco walls, red tile roof, a wrought iron gate that opened before we even slowed down. There were men with earpieces on the front lawn. Earpieces and the particular kind of posture you only get from a particular kind of training. They nodded at Calloway as we passed. A woman in her 50s met us at the door, introduced herself as Mrs. Missa Pereira, and walked me upstairs to a bedroom where someone had already laid out clothes in my size. A robe, slippers, a toothbrush still in its packaging. There was a bowl of fresh peaches on the dresser. I don't know why that's the detail that broke me, but I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at those peaches and started crying so hard I couldn't get a breath in. Mrs. Pereira sat next to me and put a hand on my back and said, in lightly accented English, It's all right, Querida. It's all right. You're safe now. Cry. I cried for a long time. Then I took a shower so hot it left my skin pink. And I put on the robe, and I sat by the window and watched the sun go down over a vineyard I didn't know existed, 12 hours ago. And I thought about my mother. Delia Holloway, 5'3", wore the same pair of New Balance sneakers for a decade, drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a dented bumper she refused to fix, made meatloaf every Sunday, showed up to my college graduation in a JCPenney dress and cried when I crossed the stage. That's the woman Calloway thought he owed his life to? I thought about every business trip she'd taken when I was a kid, every catering convention in Chicago and Miami, and once, memorably, Geneva. I thought about how our apartment in Cleveland had been a dump until suddenly, when I was 8, it wasn't, and we moved to a nice house in the suburbs, and Mom said the catering company had taken off. I thought about how she'd paid for Vanderbilt without a single loan, and when I'd asked her how, she'd said, scholarships and savings. Baby, don't worry about it. I thought about the way she'd never once, in 28 years, told me what really happened to my father. The helicopter came in just past midnight. I heard it before I saw it, that thumping sound getting louder until the windows rattled in their frames. I went out onto the balcony and watched it land in a clearing past the vineyard, and I watched the door open, and I watched my mother step out. She was wearing a black coat. Just a coat, jeans, boots. Her hair was pulled back. From the balcony in the floodlights, she looked like my mother. Same height, same posture, but there were 6 men around her, and they moved when she moved, and she walked toward the house the way a general walks across a base she owns. I met her in the foyer. I'd planned, on the way down the stairs, to be furious, to scream at her, to demand answers, to be furious, to scream at her, to demand answers. But when I saw her, all I could do was stand there with my hands at my sides and say, "Mom." She crossed the room and pulled me into her chest and held me so hard I felt my ribs creak. She didn't cry. My mother has cried in front of me exactly twice in my life, at my graduation and at my grandmother's funeral, and this wasn't one of those times, but she held me like she was confirming I was solid. And then she pulled back and held my face in her hands and looked at me for a long time. "Quinn, honey, I am so sorry." "Mom, what is?" I know, baby. Come sit down. I'll tell you everything." We sat in a study off the foyer. Calloway brought us coffee and then closed the door behind him and stood guard outside it. My mother, who an hour ago I thought made meatloaf for a living, sat across from me in a leather chair and folded her hands and started from the beginning. She said her real name was Delia Holloway. That part hadn't changed. She said she grew up in Cleveland, same as I knew, but she said that when she was 22, she'd married a man named Vincent Marchetti. She said he was the son of a family that ran what she called import-export up and down the East Coast, and that Vincent had been kind to her and then less kind, and that by the time I was 3, he'd been killed by a rival in a parking lot in Atlantic City, and Mom had taken me and run. I didn't run far enough at first, she said. They came for us in Cleveland. That's why we moved to the suburbs. That's why I changed our last name back to Holloway. Mom. Let me finish, honey, please. She said that after my father died, she'd been left with his businesses. The legitimate ones, shipping, real estate, a chain of laundromats, a holding company, and the ones that weren't. She said she tried to walk away. She said she tried for almost a year. And then, she said, the people who'd killed Vincent had come to our apartment in Cleveland one night when I was 4, and she'd shot one of them in our kitchen, and that was the night she'd decided to stop running. I went back, she said. I took the businesses. All of them. I cleaned up the ones I could clean up. The ones I couldn't, she made a small gesture with her hand. I learned to manage, and I built a life around making sure no one ever connected Delia Holloway, the catering lady from Houston, with Delia Marchetti, who happens to own about 60% of the freight that comes through 3 U.S. ports. I sat there. I drank my coffee. It was very good coffee. Mom. Yes, honey. You have men. With earpieces. I have a lot of men with earpieces, sweetheart. I have an entire firm in Houston that exists for the sole purpose of pretending to be a catering company. I have a private security detail of about 40 people, most of whom you have never seen, because their job is to make sure you never see them. Tobias. Her face changed. In that moment I saw, for the first time, the woman Calloway was afraid of. Tobias, she said, is a problem I will be solving personally. But not yet, there is a bigger problem first. What's the bigger problem? The bigger problem, Quinn, is that Tobias didn't find you on his own. She told me about a family called the Renatos, out of Philadelphia, who'd been her father-in-law's enemies and were now hers. She told me they'd been trying to get to her for 6 years through me. She told me they tried twice before, once when I was at Vanderbilt, a man in a Honda Civic following me across campus until one of Mom's people put him in a hospital, and once 2 years ago. A woman who'd tried to befriend me at my gym in Austin and disappeared the night Mom's people made a phone call. She told me Tobias had been positioned. That the consulting firm he supposedly worked for didn't exist. That the bonus he'd told me about didn't exist. That his debts were real and the Renatos had bought them and offered to forgive them in exchange for me. 3 years, I said. My mouth felt numb. He was, for 3 years. Yes, baby. He met your mother. He came to Christmas. I know. He helped me pick out a ring. Quinn, I know. I sat with that for a while. Mom didn't rush me. She just sat there watching me, with the same patience she'd had when I was 9 and trying to tie my shoes and crying because I couldn't get the loop right. Finally I said, "Why didn't you tell me? Any of it. Why didn't you just tell me?" She looked at the wall behind me for a long moment. Then she said, "Because I wanted you to have a life that wasn't this. I wanted you to study what you wanted, marry who you wanted, raise your kids without earpieces in their nursery. I thought if I built the wall high enough, you'd never have to know it was there. I was wrong. I'm sitting here telling you I was wrong, and that there is no apology in any language that covers what I owe you." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "You can leave," she said. "I will set you up anywhere in the world. New name, new papers. A trust that pays out for the rest of your natural life. You will never see me again if that's what you want, and I will accept that because I deserve it. Or you stay. And I tell you everything, and I teach you everything, and I teach you everything, and when the Renatos come for me, and they are going to come, Quinn, soon, you stand next to me when they do." I thought about the apartment in Austin, the wedding planner I'd met with 3 weeks ago, the bridesmaid dresses I'd helped pick out. I thought about Tobias sliding the duffel bag under his arm and walking out of that basement. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 days ago, who'd quit her job because her boyfriend asked her to. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Mom nodded. "Once. Just once." "All right," she said. "Then we start tomorrow." The next morning, a woman named Bet flew in from Dallas. She was 60 if she was a day, wore a cardigan, and could disassemble a Glock 19 in under 9 seconds. She taught me how to hold a pistol. She taught me how to clear a room. She taught me how to fall without breaking my wrist. In the afternoons, a man named Hussein taught me corporate finance, actual finance, balance sheets and shell companies, and the way money moves through international banks. In the evenings, my mother sat across from me at dinner and asked me questions. "That contract you just read, what's wrong with the indemnity clause? That man at the gate, what's off about him? You walked into a restaurant with 3 exits. Name them in order of preference." I was bad at all of it for the first week. I was less bad in the second. By the third, I caught Bet nodding when she thought I wasn't looking. The 4th week was when Calloway came to my room one night with a face I'd learned to read. "Ma'am, there's been a development. Tell me, the man who handled your security in Texas. Marcus Doyle, he's been with your mother 19 years. I know Marcus, he drove me to prom." "Yes, ma'am." Calloway's mouth was tight. "The Renatos have his daughter. She's at a boarding school in Connecticut. They're holding her at a property in the Poconos. They've given Marcus until Friday." The air left the room. Marcus Doyle. Marcus, we taught me to drive in a Target parking lot when I was 15 because Mom was too anxious to do it. Marcus, who'd come to every birthday party since I was 6. Marcus, who'd given me a St. Christopher medal when I went to college and told me to call him if anything ever felt wrong. day or night. Marcus had been my mother's mole. I went to Mom's office. She was already there. She looked up when I came in and I could see she'd known for hours and had been letting me come to her on my own time. Mom. Yes, honey. What are we doing about Marcus? She studied me for a long moment. What do you think we should do? I thought about it. I thought hard. I thought about the man who taught me to parallel park. I thought about a 15-year-old girl at a school in Connecticut who hadn't asked for any of this. We get his daughter back, I said. First. Before anything else. We don't punish him until she's safe. And then he's done. He doesn't work for us. He doesn't see us. But Mom, he was scared. They had his kid. I don't want him dead. She watched me for another long moment. Then she nodded. That's the right answer, she said. It's also the harder answer, she said. It's also the harder answer. Welcome to the job. The girl was retrieved on a Wednesday. I won't tell you how. Partly because I didn't ask, and partly because some of the people who did it are still doing it. Somewhere. And I owe them my discretion. She was returned to her grandmother in Maine, with no idea any of it had ever happened. Marcus was sent to a small town in New Mexico with enough money to live on and a strict instruction never to contact us again. He left a letter for me. I read it once and burned it. I'm not going to tell you what it said either. The Renatos came for us 2 days later. They sent 4 men to the estate in Portugal because they thought we were still there. We were not. We were in a townhouse in Manhattan, on the Upper East Side, where my mother kept a residence I had never been told about. The men in Portugal were handled. I was not present for that handling. I was present for what came next. The patriarch of the Renato family was a man named Thomas Renato. He was 66. He had a granddaughter who just started at Brown. He had a bad heart and a worse temper, and he agreed to meet my mother on neutral ground in Newark, New Jersey, in a warehouse that belonged, technically, to neither of us. Mom asked me if I wanted to come. I said yes. I wore a black suit she'd had made for me. I wore my grandmother's locket. I sat on her right side at a long folding table in the middle of an empty warehouse, and Thomas Renato sat across from us with 2 of his sons, and he looked at me the way you'd look at a ghost. You look like Vincent, he said. I wouldn't know, I said. I never got to meet him. His mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. My mother watched him without moving. Thomas, she said. We can do this 2 ways. She told him the 2 ways. I won't recount the conversation in detail. It was long. It involved numbers I couldn't have understood. 3 months ago. It involved territory and shipping lanes, and a set of photographs Mom slid across the table that made one of Thomas's sons go very still. But I will tell you this, at the end of it, Thomas Renato signed a piece of paper. And then he looked at me, and he said, You raised her hard, Delia. She's got the eyes. She raised herself hard, Mom said. I just made sure she had the time. We walked out of that warehouse and got in a car and drove back to Manhattan, and I looked out the window the whole way, watching the New Jersey Turnpike roll past. And I thought about a girl named Quinn who'd been engaged 6 weeks ago and didn't know any of this existed. That girl was gone. She'd died in a basement in Portugal. The woman who came home from that basement was someone else, and I was still figuring out who, but I knew this much. She didn't quit her job for a man. She didn't trade her savings for a ring. She didn't believe a story just because it came in a nice voice. Tobias. Yes, I haven't forgotten. I asked Mom, after Newark, what had happened to him. She told me. I'm not going to put it in writing. I will say only that he is alive, and that he is alive, and that he is somewhere, and that he is going to spend the rest of his life knowing exactly what he did and exactly who saw him do it. My mother is, in her way, merciful. She is not in any way I have ever seen, forgetful. A year later, at the annual board meeting of Holloway Holdings, the legitimate parent company over everything, my mother stood up and named me vice president. I wore a navy suit. My grandmother's locket was under it, against my skin. The Hummingbird, my mother told me later, had been my grandmother Iris's idea. She used to say, hummingbirds look fragile and they're not. She wanted you to have something that reminded you of that. I think about my grandmother a lot now. I never met her, she died when Mom was 19. But I wear her around my neck every day, and I understand, finally, what she was trying to tell me. We look fragile. We are not. If you're a woman watching this and you have a daughter, tell her this. The man who tells you to quit your job is not taking care of you. He is removing your options. The man who pays for everything is not generous. He is building a cage with a soft floor. Your job is not the thing keeping you from your real life. Your job is the thing that means, when the worst happens, you can put on your shoes and walk out the door without asking anyone's permission. I learned that the hard way. I'm still learning it, but I've got a locket around my neck, and a mother in the next room, and a name on a door in a building in Houston. And the next person who tries to put me in a basement is going to find out exactly what kind of bird I am. I think about that basement a lot, not in nightmares, the way you'd expect. I think about it the way you think about a doorway you walk through without realizing it. One side of that door, I was a woman who'd quit her job because a man asked me to. The other side, I was something else. The thing nobody tells you about being deceived is that the deception wasn't the moment Tobias walked me onto that plane. It started years before, in every small choice I made to ignore my own gut. The night I signed a lease on his apartment without reading it, the afternoon I emptied my savings for a ring he insisted he pay me back for. The morning I called my boss and quit a job I didn't hate, because a man with a confident smile told me my real life was waiting somewhere else. Every one of those was a door I walked through with my eyes half closed. Tobias didn't trap me in that basement. He just opened the last door. I'd already walked through all the others. That's the part I had to sit with, the hard part, because it's easy to be the victim of a story like mine. It's harder to look at the parts where I gave away pieces of myself, one at a time, and called it love. What my mother gave me in the year that followed wasn't a fortune or a title or a seat at a table in a warehouse in Newark. She gave me back my judgment. She made me earn it, hour by hour, in rooms where being wrong had consequences. She let me be bad at things until I was good at them. She refused to rescue me from my own decisions even when she could have, because she'd already learned what happens when you build someone a life so soft they can't stand up in it. I tell you this because I have come to believe that the worst thing you can do to a person you love is remove their need to think. Tobias knew that. He counted on it. He didn't just want my savings. He wanted my habit of asking him what to do. And by the time I figured out what he was, I'd given him 3 years of practice. If there is a lesson in any of this, it is small and unglamorous. Pay attention. Pay attention to the man who wants you to quit your job before he wants you to quit your bad habits. Pay attention to the friend who gets quieter when you talk about your future. Pay attention to your own gut on the morning you wake up and feel a small wrong miss you can't name. That feeling is not paranoia. That feeling is the part of you that hasn't been bought yet, telling you the price. I wear my grandmother's locket every day. I never met her, but I've come to believe she was the kind of woman who knew that a small heart can carry a great deal of weight. The hummingbird, my mother told me once, doesn't beat its wings hard because it's strong. It beats them hard because it refuses to fall. I want to be the woman who refuses to fall. I want that for you too,